Okay, hey, I'm Martin. The first time I got to know ntop was in 2018 when Simone from the ntop team came to Munich to our Checkmk conference and talked about ntop. And our user base are mostly system administrators. They saw ntop about, this is a really nice product. Looks also quite nice. They want it in Checkmk, they want it in our product as well. They want to integrate it because it looks like really like a dream team. You have network flow monitoring, you have IT monitoring. Why not build it together? So back in 2018, we then also decided, let's build an integration. And now we are 5 years later, and we actually learned quite a lot of things. And we want to share a little bit of some of the things which we have learned, what we have actually built, and also what is kind of possible when you integrate ntop into another application, and how powerful the ntop APIs have become so that you can build a lot of features around that. So I'm Martin, I work in the product team at Checkmk. I basically mostly love to build products, and I actually don't build them, the developers do so, but I basically try to break them, and that's my main hobby, to annoy our developers. And so, because to understand what we're actually building, it's kind of similar to the first topic we heard today. It's an integration of a monitoring tool with network flow monitoring. So there's quite a lot of similarities what we're doing about Checkmk. You can do with ntop, you can also do Checkmk to ntop. And to basically understand what we have done, first I'm going to speak about Checkmk itself, then get a good understanding of what we do. Then I'm going to talk about the integration, why people actually do that, why it makes sense and what you can do, how it looks like. And then what we learned from building that integration, which is something more oriented to maybe some of the developers here. So Checkmk, what does it do? It's like any monitoring tool, to be honest. Yeah, you get data from anywhere, from cloud services, from the data center, from IoT devices. You get logs, you get metrics, you get status information, and you put it all into a platform. And for that, first you need to acquire all the data. And I think what we really focus on is that you can acquire data from everywhere. That we have plugins for almost any vendor, for almost any device, for any server, for any switch, so that you don't have to put any effort into it. Then you get automatically a health assessment, that you get a state that you know, okay, is this good or bad? So you have that without having to do anything around it. And once you have basically acquired the data, you've analyzed it, you can actually then get an alert. And then from the alert, you go into and try to resolve it. It's very nice then to integrate with ntop, because to resolve it very often you need to look a little bit deeper. And you look, for example, you need to look into network flow, and so you can also do that. So where we try to be as our product, or basically what our mission is, we believe that the entire world is hybrid. Yeah, there is not just a cloud world, there's not just a data center world. It's basically both. Any company which is just in the data center as of today also will have at some point cloud services, and we also believe all the companies which are only having cloud services at some point will also realize that there are also workloads which you can and should run in a data center, and therefore we believe here you need one integrated monitoring. And these worlds are actually quite different. So data center is super heterogeneous, very different, a lot of vendors, a lot of different devices, and in the cloud it's much more uniform but much more dynamic as well. So what is special about it? So basically, I think the Checkmk can monitor almost anything in the data center. Yeah, you can monitor servers, you can monitor switches, routers, you can monitor even more exotic operating systems, you can monitor your Kubernetes, you can monitor a couple of applications as well, and in the cloud you can also monitor stuff. How we think about stuff, we really try to automate as much as possible in Checkmk. And so one thing is to auto-register workload. So a asset starts, could be a virtual machine, the asset itself auto-registers at Checkmk, it gets automatically monitored, and then when the asset is terminated, you can actually also remove it. Sometimes if an asset is terminated, that's something you don't want, so it's actually something which we don't do as a must, but as a can. Then what you get, this is actually how the product then looks like. We get a list of services. This is a virtual machine. Actually, it's a website and which is running on it as well, and you get, these are our services. So they are an abstraction of metrics, a summary of metrics, and they provide, is it good or bad? Here everything is good or fine. Could be something like CPU utilization, could be something like file systems, you also have an interface here, and so on. And you get them out of the box, you don't have to do a lot of stuff around it. and you get a lot of metrics. So you don't just get metrics like big list of metrics, but we try to put them into relation so that you, for example, can see, hey, for active and inactive memory, it's basically sum of different metrics. It's not just an individual metric. We try to put these things into relation automatically. You can also get dashboards. So for example, this one of our Kubernetes default dashboards, which show you, okay, immediately with one view, is everything good or not? To understand the performance, utilization of things. Yeah. And last, in the end, you of course want to get some alerts. Can get them via email, but also via any other tool. Where we are very proud of that, we can actually, like, our software scales quite well vertically. So with just one instance, here a couple of examples from real customers. So that's a finance customer of ours. They have 12 instances of Checkmk. On each instance, there are a couple of 100,000 services, and these were the lines which you just saw before are running on one instance. So that's one of the things. So we really try to make it scale vertically as well, but also horizontally. This is, for example, retail customers of ours. We have supermarket stores all around the world, and so they actually also need, for geographic reasons, to distribute the load over the world. So they have 170 instances. The other actually is also a retail company. They have 5,000 instances of Checkmk running, and then they basically try to combine it together. So we come from the open source world as well. So that's basically an open core business model. We have an open source software. We finance it with our enterprise software, and that also makes basically the software very easy to extend. And we believe, like, when you build monitoring software, it needs to be extensible, because even if you try to cover everything, you can't. Like, it's impossible to have an extension for everything. So our software is mostly written in Python, so you can just write your own extension. And we have developer APIs, and especially we have a built-in logic, so that can work with customizations. So it always has a place in the file system where you can put your stuff, and it automatically sees, there's a file in that. Okay, I understand what I need to do with that. So we also have a big community for monitoring. We have a forum. We have roughly 6,000 people who are registered there. We have on a daily basis 10,000 people visiting it. We actually only in 2018 we moved to GitHub. So we are quite late to the GitHub game. We had our own Git repository before, which was public, but no one was knowing about it. 2018 we moved to GitHub. We also then basically became more open for others to contribute to Checkmk, and that has actually helped us quite a lot. So we have a lot of people who are supporting, who are working together with us on Checkmk, and yeah. As a company, we are based in Munich. We are now 150 people. We have been doing IT monitoring for 15 years, and have also a lot of customers. So it's actually also going quite nice. And I think that helps us to basically finance our open source monitoring. Most of the stuff which we built goes actually also into our open source product, which is important to us because we get a lot of knowledge, we get a lot of expertise back from these users into Checkmk. They help each other out, and that makes the entire thing kind of work. Okay, so enough about Checkmk. So why would it actually make sense to integrate Checkmk and ntop? Yeah? Checkmk can do a couple of things already for network monitoring. You get, like, when you do network, we call it network performance monitoring, you get metrics on bandwidth, you get metrics on error rate, on packet rate, so you can see if there's an error rate, you can get an alarm that says, okay, you shouldn't have error rate on maybe a switch, yeah? And then you can get an alert for that. You can also see what is the network interface status, is it up or down, what is the speed which it should have, for example, is it a 10 megabit interface, is it a 1 gigabit interface, and so on. And then you can set the alerts based on, for example, the speed it should have. Yeah. But that's where Checkmk ends, and a lot of other things which might make sense. Yeah. So, for example, to really understand what is the root cause behind something. Yeah. To understand the network flows. I mean, you know, the top talker feature of ntop, that's something which we of course don't have. Yeah. And in the performance monitoring, and also threat detection. Threat detection is actually something which, especially in Germany, has become quite important from regulation for critical infrastructure. And that's why a lot of our users now actually are also adopting tools like ntop, because it's a must-have nowadays. And it's actually then quite nice to see these things together. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why we actually said, hey, for our user base, it makes quite a lot of sense to integrate Checkmk and ntop. And what are some of the use cases, or what I actually asked a colleague of mine who is specialized in network monitoring, why would you do that and how would a workflow like this look like? And it's kind of similar to what we have seen before. You have, for example, a remote location with really low bandwidth. In this case, was only 2 megabits. Yeah, and mostly Citrix virtual desktop running on it. Kind of 2 megabit was enough for that, but every once in a while, they basically was unusable in the application because someone was hogging the entire bandwidth and like no one knew why. Yeah? And it was always only coming every once in a while, so it was not a regular pattern which was happening. So, okay, what you do bandwidth monitoring. You try to set an alert, okay, as soon as someone is occupying the bandwidth again, give me an alert so that I can find who is this culprit and can analyze and look at the flows so that you don't have to search for the needle in the haystack, that you can have a little bit more of a targeted search towards the root cause. And so the alert came, and so my colleague looked into ntop, saw, hey, there's a lot of SSH traffic that shouldn't be there. So this is really like, should not be like that on that location. It was actually a university, yeah. And so what was the reason for that? The infrastructure was actually also used by students who did a lot of SCP. They copied a lot of research data around the machines, and no one knew about that. And they actually also didn't know that this was kind of a limited bandwidth, so they didn't know that this would cause problems. And that was one of the main reasons, for example, hey, it's really easy because this way you can, from Checkmk, you get your alert, and then you look into ntop, and back then we didn't have the integration, so it was a little bit more cumbersome. So they looked into ntop and see, hey, that's a root cause, and they were able to resolve the issue that the students did in the end. How does it look like? Yeah, so Checkmk, if you look into network interface monitoring, for example, it looks a little bit like this in the details. You get your first use state. I set an alert on that. I did some bandwidth monitoring. So this is just some random machine which I did for demo purposes. Yeah, and you can see, hey, there's in traffic, and I see there's 6 megabytes, and actually set some alerts which are based on the interface speed at around 50% because I wanted to trigger an alert. And then I see, okay, I get an alert. You can see a lot of other metrics coming. There's basically a graph, but that's all what you can see in Checkmk. You can see, okay, hey, that's what happened to my bandwidth through my interface, but you can see error rates, but that's the end of what we have as information. And that doesn't tell me like what is actually happening. And so what we built is this integration to ntop, and we put basically almost everything that you can find in ntop into Checkmk. And so for each host which exists inside of Checkmk and also exists in ntop, we basically carry the information from ntop and visualize it in Checkmk so that users don't have to jump between different tools, don't have to log in again. They see everything inside one tool, and they don't have to find the host in ntop first, but they see all the information. And here I will jump over them just so that you can see what is possible, and because I hope most of the things that you see here are quite familiar. So we have the so-called host overview, but we also have, you can see the tabs here, traffic, you can see the peers, you can see the apps, you can see, here, for example, flows, and you can see, for example, alerts. So all this information, I think, what's, go a little bit back because I think, and we also put all the filters in here so that you actually, because this is a lot of data, and then it's so much data, I think in this case it's only 68 flows, so it's doable, I would say. But as soon as it becomes quite a lot, then these filters are quite helpful. So you can basically filter also directly in Checkmk down to all the stuff in ntop. So, and there's no need for to go to ntop for quick analysis. I think if you really want to go deeper, you always have to go to ntop, because then ntop has much more tools than we have inside. We basically just use a couple of the functionality of ntop. Yeah. So this is basically all related to the one host. So for this one host, this is in case, I think this is one of our print servers. You see basically all the flows, all the alerts related to that server or to that host. We also have, because it looks so nice, we put the top talkers also into the product, because you always need some eye candy as well. So not sure if there's actually a real use case, but we also put the top talkers into the product, so you can from Checkmk directly see them as well. And we put not only that you have the data on the host, but if you want to have all flows and see all flows. I think we here flows, I would assume, yeah. No, this is alerts. That you can see all alerts directly in Checkmk. You can filter for them. You can select type and severity and get the data down there. Yeah. Same for flows. What we've seen for an individual host, you can also get that for all hosts, for all things inside. Yeah. So this is a little bit what we actually built, and why do we actually do that? What is like? I mean, you have ntop, you have Checkmk. Why would you actually need it? Single pane of glass is the main reason, because people really they don't want to switch around tools all the time. And for us, most of our users are obviously Checkmk users, and ntop is an additional tool which they use, but they do most of the work in Checkmk. So for them, it's quite simplification of the workflows if they don't have to go to the other tool, and they can have everything inside of Checkmk. Yeah. The other thing is we put a lot of deep links into it, so that directly from Checkmk, I think here you can see it. These are all deep links into ntop, so that you end up directly at the relevant information. Here you see some icons. These lead them to Checkmk to the respective host, because this host is also in Checkmk available, so you can see the respective data also in Checkmk. So it's a little bit easy to navigate around the data and make sense of it. So what did we learn from it? I think one of the first things when we built in 2018, we built on, and we understood Checkmk and ntop have different release models. We basically build our software and we have major versions and then patch releases. And for our users, it's very important that basically everything kind of is as stable as possible, because if the monitoring is off and doesn't alert, it's a catastrophe. Yeah, it should never happen. So we have a little bit more slower release cycle. And I think we learned from ntop it's a little bit faster. Yeah? And so basically that led to problems with the APIs, because we use the ntop APIs to get a lot of the data. So we are relying on features in the APIs available. Yeah? And I think that's something which has greatly improved over the last years. I think we were actually one of the last ones who were using the old API. And we switched this year only to the new REST API, which was a great improvement for us. And what we actually learned, so I asked some of the developers, what did they see? Yeah? It seems to be super obvious, but we actually learned only that quite late, because obviously when we built it, we had the enterprise version of ntop. Yeah? So all the calls which we built, everything which we built was based on ntop-ng enterprise, yeah, from the functionality. When we then gave that to users, and the Checkmk users who didn't have ntop, they installed the free version of ntop, didn't work. Same for our testers, that doesn't work. And so we only very lately realized, hey, so the APIs have different, don't have all the functionality, of course, yeah. For example, I think Top Talkers is only available enterprise, yeah. And so make that very clear to your users what they need, yeah. Or build the integration in a way that it can work with both API versions, or basically both products. And for us, that was a little bit late in the process when we learned that. The other thing is, when you build such an integration, from the beginning, build the architecture in a way that it can deal with multiple API calls. Because one API call will not be able to give you all the data that you need. For example, I think when we wanted to get the engaged alerts, we realized we actually need multiple API calls to get all the engaged alerts into Checkmk. And that led to a little bit of a change in the way how we basically built the integration. If we would have known about that from the beginning, we would have built some things differently. And then our biggest issue is performance. Because when we build it, our own environment and our infrastructure, our company is small. Yeah? We have 150 servers maybe, yeah, or virtual machines. Yeah? We have a couple of switches. Yeah? It's not a lot of traffic which we have. So we never had performance problems when we built it the first time. And especially after we upgraded to ClickHouse-DB, we had no problems at all. Yeah? But when we gave it to customers, and even in smaller environments, yeah, they said, yeah, we have 7 terabytes of data in ntop every day, which we accumulate. Okay, dealing with that kind of data from another application by an API and building it in the way you have seen, we really try to replicate all the ntop data Checkmk, will lead to problems, because in the beginning we didn't consider that properly. So this meant for us that we actually had to put a lot of effort post-release into performance. So I think after release, that's why we're still working on it. I think because we have some customers with really big networks, and then they basically integrate ntop and Checkmk. We have to do further performance improvements because we realize, okay, this kind of thing will not work because like there's really a lot of data in ntop. Yeah? So if you would have to rebuild it from the beginning, you would probably strip down some of the functionality, which is really expensive. Yeah? For API calls, and we would also for visualization in Checkmk. And some other things, we didn't have pagination in our views, and so we basically queried all the data, and that was not great. And so querying a definite number of items, yeah, but the API also needs to support that. Yeah. So that actually makes quite a lot of sense, really helps from performance-wise, and work a lot with caching, because if you really, every time someone clicks on a host, tries to get the latest data from ntop, this will really destroy the performance. So you have to work cleverly with caching to get the data in, and get it on a regular basis, so that because people expect that they get the data instantaneously. And that is a challenge. So we work a lot with caching. We're still working with caching because we haven't solved everything. In bigger environments and smaller environments, everything works. But in bigger environments, we realize, okay, we have to even work further with caching and only getting some of the data in on demand, cache some of the data, but work much more flexibly. And then when it comes to the API, I think this was very nice for us to learn, and it was really nice in the collaboration with ntop. We thought, hey, cool, you have this really nice documentation now, it's super helpful. These are all the parameters which you can use, and then this is not all which we need. And then we learned, hey, something like this will also work. Start, length, and status are not specified and are not there. You will not know about them, but if you want pagination, they're super important. And they're not documented, but they're available. So that's super nice. So actually this REST API, or basically API, has more functionalities than which you might know about, which is really cool for us. And I think there we really want to thank the ntop team, because whenever we reached out to them, whenever we needed some help, yeah, they were super responsive, they were super helpful. They were like, yeah, this is all available, you can use it. Okay, cool, so we don't have to worry about it. And it was very nice in the collaboration, so I want to thank you for helping us there, because otherwise we would have performance issues even up to today. Yeah. That's what we built. This is what is kind of possible when you integrate ntop to another tool. So you can see, you can basically replicate quite a lot of functionality from ntop, put it into your own tool for whatever reason you might want that. Yeah. Quite a lot of stuff is possible. A lot of features are there now which help you performance-wise. And it's really nice to work with the ntop guys. That's what I can share.